So today we'll be taking a look at this Rode PSA1 Mic Boom Stand. And by this, current image, you should know why am I reviewing this stand itself. I'm Richard and welcome to ZP Productions. I'm reviewing the Rode PSA1 Mic Boom Stand because of this thing here. It just held my camera at a very stable position overhead. And I ask you, if you have used a boom stand before, how easy is it to set up? How easy is it to adjust? And more importantly, how much space does it consume to set it up? Notice that this is so convenient. It clamps on the table. I could adjust it with one hand and it could hold a setup like this. This is the Canon EOS R with a 35 1.8 and a ball head, and the total weight is about 1.5 kg. Now, the stand is of course only rated for 1.1 kg or 2.4 pounds, but notice it is still quite stable. It doesn't shift up and down. It doesn't slide. And if you ask me, it is a fantastic stand for overhead video and overhead photography itself over a small piece of table. Now, if you have seen my Galaxy Note 10 review, I have used this setup extensively and I think it pretty much worked out well. I held this camera out over for about 1 hour plus during the course of recording the review, and it pretty much held out really well. So let's take a look at this stand. How is it built? Is it safe? And of course, its price and what other caveats using this stand itself? Obviously, there is some weakness in this stand. So for the first section, it is on the build quality. Now, this stand is really solidly built and it has an internal spring mechanism. You notice you can't see any spring external wise, and there is no locking mechanism for both its swivel and its up, down and forward motion. The only locking mechanism is this mechanism here. This is to adjust the tilt forward and backward like as such in this mic here, and it is really just for adjustment on the end. If not, everything is by friction and by pure spring power. Now, this stand itself is not locked to your table also. So if you lift it up, it literally will lift out of this slot itself. And this slot is purely held by friction. So if you hit this stand, it will actually slide quite easily. Now, this stand, as I said, is quite solidly built. As you can see in the front of this stand here, this is probably 2 mm of metal and this is probably really rigid aluminum. Now, how do I know it's aluminum? Because my magnet here cannot hold it in any way unless this is made of certain carbon steel, which is also not magnetic in nature. I don't believe this is made of carbon steel because it's probably a little too cheap for it. So it's probably really hard aluminum itself. Then the stand, as I say, is purely internal spring. As you can see, there is no any external spring nor any locking mechanism. One of the good things of this stand is that in terms of build, they actually have a nice groove here. So this groove is actually allowing you to put the camera or the mic and then put a cable, and then they provide you velcros to hold the cables through the rod itself and then going through this groove. So there is lead to the bottom rod and there's one more velcro given to you here. Overall, it's a really neat setup, and by having your velcros and your cables to go along the mic stand itself, it also protects the cable in case something hits it. It doesn't rip out of the camera, damaging everything in the process. If you just pull from the bottom and most of the stand just swivels and nothing gets damaged in the process itself. So it's quite a neat thing that they did. So putting away my stand just now, I am showing you the mount on the table itself. Now, the Rode mount is really nice because it is much bigger. Let me show you an image here. That mount is a lot smaller. It's just like a small little pad in front here. And the other thing about the Rode mount is that it mounts in the center of this whole mechanism. So this whole thing is made of metal, it's solid, and this whole center area at least spreads out the weight evenly across. So the thing is that as the stand swivels from different angles, there is always a good amount of space and friction holding the rod up so that it doesn't bend and slide off the table itself. So what happened to my previous stand is that I'm mounting something that is not as heavy as this, even lighter than this, and it started sliding and damaging my table because as it slides, the metal actually presses against the table and cause some sort of indent into the table itself. While the Rode version is a lot more stable, it has a bigger surface area and it is loaded in the center itself. So no matter which angle it does, there is enough space and surface area to even out the pressure on the table itself. Now, one thing about such a clamp is that if you are using a softwood table, do not buy this clamp because you need to clamp quite hard if you want to mount something like a camera. And if you didn't clamp hard enough, this clamp will shift and it is dangerous because it can actually slide off the table if you didn't notice it. If you clamp it really hard on a softwood table, you will leave a marking which, damages the table. So I don't think that is what you want. So to save the table in the process, you can actually put pieces of scrape wood in between the clamps and the table itself and clamp down on the scrape wood really hard. If not, try not to clamp it on softwood table. So my table here is a plywood table. It's perfectly fine. I can clamp as hard as I like. It doesn't create any decent, or should I say, it doesn't create any significant marking. And this is a cheap table, so I don't really care. Now, my previous dining table with a previous clamp actually had some markings, which is the reason why I would recommend you, firstly, don't get a cheap stand to do anything, because the cheap stand will mark your table a lot easier. And also, even with a Rode stand itself, you know, if you're going to mount something heavy, do use scrape wood, because you need to clamp really, really hard on your table itself. So as I said, this is a really convenient stand, but of course there are caveats to this stand. There are some things that you need to note while using the stand itself. Firstly is that because this is purely a spring-loaded, there is no knocking knobs. Sometimes at certain angles, the camera don't work. So let's say everything, notice it droops down a little bit. Well, after that, it will just stabilizes at a certain angle or a certain height. So just to note, this stand doesn't work in every single angle, because there are some angles that the spring and friction just doesn't hold it well enough, and it just doesn't hold the position. Well, almost every other angle, especially lower angles like this, usually have no problem. But the higher angles, you have to be careful and make sure that, you know, before you let go totally, just let it go lightly so that your hand is below it, so that the camera don't smash to the ground, you know, in very unfortunate circumstances. But I have never encountered that before, and more often than not, even if it drops, it just goes slightly and it holds there stably. So I think normally that won't be a problem. And secondly, do not overload the stand, because this is purely a spring and friction loaded. If you load something more than this setup, I cannot guarantee it work, because after I try so long, this is probably the most stable setup I can get. Of course, I can do with a lighter setup by having a lighter ball head and a lighter lens. There are ways to do it, or maybe even use a lighter base plates to reduce the weight and therefore increase the stability of the system. But just note, do not load something so heavy on it that the moment you let go, it slams to the ground. That is something that you don't want to see happen. The last thing that you want to know is that because this is a spring-loaded stand, there is no lock. This is not a full rigid body. What I mean is that when you do press against the table, notice that the camera shakes. And you can't really see with your eye, but if you look in a video itself, example in this video, you notice that the whole frame is just slightly shifting left and right. That can be really, really irritating in your video. So just to note that, you know, this is not a rigid body, and if your table is not really, really rigid, hitting it will cause vibration to be transferred to the arm and therefore cause this whole setup to oscillate a little, which is quite groggy in nature. I'm not really sure you can stabilize it all the time, but sometimes, you know, I tried, it does stabilize. Sometimes it doesn't stabilize really well. So that is something to note. Now, this stand is really a very nifty stand. You can mount cameras. You can also mount something like this. This is the Nunlite PowerTube 6C, and with Manex, you can probably mount it on the stand. This is overloading the stand, so don't do this normally. But without the camera, you can easily mount this light on top the stand without much problem. You can actually mount really light, I would say, it's like fabric LEDs. You know, there are fabric LEDs that you can see, for example, in this image. Those are really light, and you probably can mount on this stand quite easily too. So there are many things you can mount on it and allow you to give overhead light, overhead camera, or overhead mics. There are countless possibilities with this stand. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video, because this is a short review, plus it's also a tip and trick video, because I find that a lot of times I need to solve certain problems such as overhead photography, overhead videography, and putting something like a stand is not viable because I have no space. This room is, for example, only a 2.6 by 3.5 meter room. It is a really small room. So another stand is probably not something I want. So this option here is really good. Now, if you like such tips and tricks that I pick up along the way where I do research to solve my problems, do write down in the comments below. Probably I can create more videos of such reviews and tips and tricks that you can utilize in your day-to-day photography, day-to-day videography. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do like and subscribe if you want to see more updates. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.